Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome back to Word Docs. I am your host with the most, Alex Vickery Howe. I am here with Amy T. Matthews.
I don't have anything much. I'm not even the most, not the least. I'm here.
You're just here. Everyone's a bit tired today. We're all a bit overworked. And Sean L. Williams.
Well, I want to call Amy Average Amy because she's just
medium.
in the middle.
She's medium.
Medium Amy. And I also want to know what Alex has the most of. But apart from all that, hello, everyone. Hello.
The most coffee and Moscato, so I'm powering through. So this is going to be quite a new episode for me because I'm going to ask these two all the questions I've secretly wanted to ask about how you go putting your work out there in the world and submitting to agents and publishers.
This is a tactic on our part too because it stops us getting like 600 text messages. What about this? And then what? And then what?
Okay. That's
well,
true.
I was thinking that if we told Alex a bunch of lies, then that reduces the competition.
Good point.
So
Exactly
I
right.
really wouldn't think of me as competition.
it says a lot that we do, Alex.
My friend the other day was saying, you've got to get your work out there. My friend Caleb's read bits of stories, novels, and so on, and keeps saying, why don't you put these things out there, you know? And the metaphor he used, which I really liked, was, you've started all these Tinder profiles, but you haven't put any of them live yet. And I thought, as awful a metaphor it is, I thought that's so true.
Yeah, because you join the gym and you're trying to get in shape before anyone meets you. That's as you put this really hot picture up and you're like, well, I've got to match the picture.
I've got to match that photoshopped picture. So, yeah, it is hard. I think it's a stereotype, but a lot of authors are shy people, and even the ones who aren't shy people, they may be very outgoing people, but they are shy about their work because it is something that makes you feel vulnerable. It's something that makes you feel
exposed.
I was going to say naked. All of my metaphors are going to a weird place.
Do you think maybe there's two types, though? In my experience, having taught for a long time, there seem to be two groups of us. There are those of us who are shy and a little bit anxious about being exposed and a perfectionistic and take forever to send out. And then there are those of us in an equally big camp who are really confident, maybe not confident, but they feel like this is the thing I'm good at and they jump the gun and get out really early, maybe before they should ever get out.
Right. Well, that's my worst fear, but I think I've gone too far. I've definitely gone too far the other way. In fact, probably one of the reasons that I'm a playwright is that art form, in some ways, and this is an interesting comparison to make, in some ways it's an easier way to get out there because you never have to take that step yourself as much.
Yeah.
Because
right.
you might just show your work to a director or an actor, and that person will go, great, I'd love to do this. Let's get a gang together, you know?
With Watchlist, didn't the director literally take it away from you?
Yes. It was a lot of redrafting, a lot of mucking around, and eventually it became, give me the effing thing. Okay, I'm taking it. And then it was great.
Yeah.
This is great. You know,
it's done.
And that happens a lot. You've committed to doing something. But because it's a gang, because it's a collaborative thing, they come in and kind of rescue you in a way.
It's more like being in a band, right?
It's like being in a band.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a writer's not really the lead singer.
Well, and if it goes badly, you can just blame them.
Blame the band.
Yeah, that's right. And if it goes really well, then you can say, actually, it was all me.
It was all me. That's the way you do it. One of the best, I'm going to get onto some questions in a second, but one of the best and most horrible Alex moods. But one time I was doing a show that the script had been kind of accepted by this venue, but they weren't sure if they were going to accept the production or not. So they kind of said, the script's fantastic, but we're going to come in and watch some rehearsals.
Oh, it's like when they want Freddie Mercury, but not the band.
Maybe not the band. And I was I was the only person not anxious that day. And the director said, why aren't you more nervous? I'm like, I'm in the clear.
Already won.
Like, whatever happens, and then I thought, I am being monstrous. So I actually kind of excused myself and went away for a bit and said, you know what?
So you're saying that excusing yourself was easier than faking, like worry for your friends?
rather than pretend to have empathy, it was easier to remove myself from the
I've reduced
situation.
my emotional labour.
So that all of that is just to say that my experience is in a very different field and a very different environment. But what the two of you have done is put yourselves out there. You have Tinder profiles.
Have some dates.
Yeah, gone on some dates. Yeah. They've gone all the way. I'm going to stop this whole metaphor. Okay.
He's calling us tarts, Sean. He's calling us easy.
I'm calling you tarts.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Flashing your books around town. So...
But I wasn't in the early days. I was very nervous. I was very shy when I was a virgin writer. When I dropped out of uni to become a writer and started writing short story after short story after short story, each one of them being a Tinder profile, I wasn't following up on any of these dates. I was getting all these...
I'm just letting you go now. I'm letting you go.
I can't push it any further. I was writing all these stories and I wasn't sending them anywhere, and I knew I had to send them somewhere, but I just didn't have the confidence. And it took another writer that I met, and I asked for his advice. I said, I've got all these stories. I don't know where to send them. And he said, just send them all out, flood the market. And that's what I did. And that was the best advice I've ever had. And I've never kind of looked back. And I think there was something easier about sending out 30 stories at once than sending one.
And worrying about it. And that's what people do, right? Is they send it out and then they're like on tenterhooks, waiting.
It's like if you go on one date.
Yeah.
One date, your whole life rests on one date. But if you go out on 30, what does it matter?
If you walk into an orgy, there's no pressure.
Oh my God. This might be a male-female thing. I'm a one-date kind of person.
We're getting deeply personal now.
Anyway, what's interesting about that is the waiting, right? Is the waiting for the phone call or in these days, the email. So, so many people who send out their thing and then they're checking their emails constantly and like daily, and it can take months and months. So you kind of, I don't know. It's like getting a message maybe on Tinder more than a date, and then waiting, thinking, putting all your eggs in that basket. This person messaged me, we're going to get married and have 6 kids and it's all going to be amazing. It's more like that, probably.
There's going to be a white picket fence and a dog named John.
And that person who messaged you is also messaging, 100 other people that day, because most agents and publishers are getting so many submissions.
Oh, look, from their perspective, I think it would be overwhelming.
I was just going to extend that messaging metaphor and say, you put your manuscript out, your agent submits it. It's like looking at a message on read. When you've made the first move and you're just waiting for the response. It's the worst thing about this industry, I think, is the waiting.
Oh, it's so painful.
It's soul destroying.
So my first question, we haven't even got to my first question yet, which was, in a way, we've kind of jumped the gun, because the first question really is, how do you find an agent before you put yourself out there? How do you find them? Do you stalk people? I'm aware, of course.
But how do you even know them, right? Like when you say, do you stalk them? Because I had a student actually email me the other day because I'd said on their workshop submission, this is publishable, you should send it out. And I got an email back going, but where? Where do I send it? Who publishes short stories? And it's just like, you forget, like you learned all of that at some point. At some point you didn't know. So how do you even know who the agents are?
It's never been easier to find that information than the present time, because it's all online somewhere.
On Tinder for agents.
There's an Australian literary agents website.
Yes, there is. I always forget what it's called. But,
me
Google
too.
will find it for you. There are market websites that'll connect you up with short stories, and they'll give you things like average response times for each market, et cetera, et cetera. But unless you know those things exist, you might never think to go look for them. Whereas back in my day, back in the dark ages, the internet existed, but there was no Google, there was no searching.
Was there no Ask Jeeves, or what was it? There was Ask Jeeves, and there was Out of Vista or something?
No, when I started, it was a book. It was a big book, The Publishers
correct.
Marketplace, and you had to go look through the book. And
I've got that book. Someone gave me that
I
book.
think I've still got an old copy of one. But what was interesting, I was about to say, the other thing to know is in Australia, of course, we have writers' centres. So although they're getting steadily defunded by our government, but, each state, so in South Australia, we have Writers SA, and on their website, they have a little button you can press on their menu, which will show you who's seeking submissions at the moment, and that can be publishers and short stories, and then they have a competition page for things like short stories and unpublished manuscripts, published novels. So those kinds of organisations, so Writers SA, Victorian Writers Centre, the Wheeler Centre,
PwC,
there's
Writers.
There's so many of them in Australia, and then there are organisations like you guys can say yours, but we've got the Romance Writers of Australia, Australia, for example, Romance Writers of America.
Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America.
The Historical Fiction Authors Group. There's one in Australia, there's one in England. There are all these kinds of niche groups that cater specifically to littler markets like that, to subgenres, and they're great places to start, to join. They have conferences, they have online workshops, they have newsletters. Newsletters are a great way to find out about things. So that's always my advice, is to start by trying to find your community, because the community is where you'll learn.
Find your people,
Yeah, these days they will have Facebook groups. You'll know Twitter, which hashtags to follow.
You would have heard our ad just recently for the Romance Writers of Australia conference coming up in 2021. Go to that.
Very, very professional ad that we do. They run a conference every year. Sure, there's GenreCon. There's all kinds. You can go to the Writers' Weeks. You'll often get really good advice there. You can ask. You can line up, sign a book, ask the author to sign it and say, how did you get published? You can ask the question. Like, I think everyone's got a different story, but there's certainly a lot of avenues out there for things like short stories.
And everyone behind these organisations is likely to be a writer, and a writer is really the best person to get this information from.
Yeah.
So any way you can find to get out and meet writers and ask them, that's the way to get this knowledge. There's no single knowledge. It's not like London taxi drivers where they train for years and years to learn the knowledge with a capital K, which is the map of London. There is sort of a collective knowledge. And when I was trying to source agents, I asked every writer that I met, how do I get an agent? When should I get an agent? What should I do? And it was Kim Stanley Robinson, author of the Mars trilogy and many other great books, who once said, look, if you ask 5 writers, for advice on their agents, you'll probably get 6 different opinions. And he gave me the best advice I ever got about getting an agent or a publisher, which is to offer them free money, but we can come back and talk to that.
Free money. Well, this is good. So, because you're sort of leading me into my second question, which is, how do I know if I'm being annoying? Because you've said, talk to writers at conferences, talk to agents, get to know people. But I know as a teacher that sometimes, and I've got to phrase this very carefully. Some students have an interest and you want to help them because they have an interest, but others want you to do the work for them in the sense of, make my work famous or something like that.
I think that's the answer, right? Is you want to be professional and very adult about things, like go into it as a professional thing. And I think that's about managing your emotions, your needs, like your naked desire, really.
Going back to Tinder, yeah.
Yeah, but you want it so much when we start, like if you make it, it's because you wanted it mostly. There are a few people who luck into it, but we do, I meet them, you go to any kind of festival or talk or even teaching every semester, you meet a couple of students who just want it so badly and they want it right now. And I think that's just about managing those emotions. You can feel all of that, but you don't need to show that to everybody, right?
Right, yes.
Because it really is a professional relationship, and that it's a bit like dating. You don't want to be turning up to that first date and being like, I want to get married. When are we going to get married?
There'll be a dog called John and there'll be a daughter called Millie and a son.
Yeah, you don't want to creep people out.
Yeah, son called Paul.
It's very white bread, Alex. I'm disappointed in the lack of diversity.
There'll be a son called Rhaegar and a daughter called...
Better.
Yeah, okay.
But don't you think as well, it's that community is where you get help there too, because you can ask, like I'm on, because I have so many different personas, so many different communities for writing, and they'll have their own little Facebook chat group, right? And then every day there'll be a message like, oh, I haven't heard back from my agent about this. What do you think it means? Or I want to try this. What do you think I do? And you kind of use other people as a sounding board. And if everyone goes, you're being a bit desperate, calm down. Because like Sean was saying, that it's that waiting is the worst bit of the industry, actually. And it can be months. It can be months and months. And if you don't have an agent to follow up for you, you're like, when do I send a follow-up email? And I had a publisher once lose my manuscript.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And my email, which was on the manuscript, and so was waiting for me to reach out to go, hey, so they could say, oh, can you send it again? But this was back in hard copy days too. So you kind of have to follow up. And also they're often overwhelmed, so you need to prompt them sometimes so they go, oh, yeah, better read that.
And I think one of the ways of meeting writers that we haven't mentioned yet is writers' groups. I did talk about them in a previous episode, in the commandments episode, I think, where I also mentioned that one of the commandments is don't be a dick. So make sure you're not being a dick at any point in this process.
Still struggling with that, Sean. I'm struggling.
But writer's groups can be really helpful, and they are a great way to learn what's reasonable and to gain emotional support in times of great crisis, or to gain the confidence to do the things that you decide you need to do in order to become the kind of writer you want to be. Another very important commandment there.
But the other thing is it's cultural too. Like as Australians and people in the UK too, but Australians are very humble and don't
that tall poppy thing, right?
Yeah, we don't like people big noting themselves, and we find it very uncomfortable to brag about ourselves or to be pushy. Whereas like if you're dealing with the US, which I am, they don't mind being pushy. Do you know, like those agents don't mind if you're like, hey, where's this, or because you will never be as pushy as some of their other clients.
That's
and
right.
They're just often, I find, particularly New Yorkers are so blunt. Like they're just so quick and blunt. And so I think part of your worrying about being annoying is partly cultural.
I think so. And one of the other things that and I'm sure other people listening feel this way as well, is when you meet people who have accomplished what you're aspiring to accomplish, part of you feels like, why do I need to bother them? They've done it. Like, why do they, there's part of me that goes, do they really want to have to advise someone about what they've already done? Wouldn't they rather just do their own friggin' work?
Well, sometimes it is like that.
Yeah, and the ones who do feel that way often don't go down to the bar, for example. They'll go off with their friends somewhere private. It's
for
true.
Sure.
Like if you go to a conference, or they won't hang around after like you can tell by body language. There are a group of authors who, they might just be having a bad day, or maybe they don't do that, or they're too shy, or they have been doing this for 30 years and they're really not into this anymore.
Yeah, which I can totally understand.
I know some authors who, when we go to conference, they'll book the higher suites, which have their own private breakfast room and bar. So they'll disappear up there away from the beginners and the plebs and that is more just privacy. That's about not being bothered in the middle of your scrambled eggs.
Absolutely. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that at all. It is hierarchical, but it's earned. It's not born, if you know what I mean.
And that's just about also being able to have private conversations, I think, too, like about their money or about, but I think if they are there open to you, that's part of what you do as an established author, I think, if you make yourself available, because people helped them.
Yes, absolutely. Paying it forward.
I think I'd put myself in not quite established maybe, but anyway, in that group, I think you do go hang around the bar like, well, I'm here, I can answer questions. What do you need?
See, I'm quite inclined to, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong.
They're pretty sure you think.
You're always wrong. Always.
I was going to say, I don't think I'm annoying in that way. I think I do the opposite, whereas I'm getting back to the Tinder metaphor. I'm the person who misses all the signals when someone actually does want to talk. I'm the person who goes, oh, no, we're just friends. Like, like I don't...
She just asked me out for eggplant curry.
Yeah. I mean...
Netflix and chill means Netflix and chill.
Yeah, I had a...
brought a stack of DVDs to the date. You said you wanted to hang out and watch films.
And good films, too, that you really want to see.
Really good.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had a close friend who's now married who said, like, 15 years ago, when I offered to drive you home and you kept saying it's out of your way? Well, you're not getting that. And I was like, I just thought that was you being nice. Like, I'm that person.
My partner is that person. He ends up on dates with people not realising
he is that person. Johnny
bad.
is that person.
He's really bad.
And so I think that can be, I think I often miss people who want to collaborate or people who want to seriously talk about work. They might ask a question and I'll go, let's talk about something else.
But this is a work relationship, and if somebody wants to work with you but isn't prepared to say, hey, I would really like to work with you, maybe they're not the right person to work with, because maybe they if you're not going to communicate what your needs or desires are in a relationship, then maybe that's not the right relationship to be in the first place. But I also think going to the bar to meet and get knowledge from other people is an age-old tradition in writing and other art forms, and it works to a certain extent, but really there's nothing worse than somebody handing out business cards at the bar or
you don't want to be pushy
and having a list of people they want to talk to because they really need to make those connections. They're the worst.
And you feel that when people come up to you sometimes. There's a difference between a genuine person who wants to talk and someone who's for some reason decided I must talk to everyone in this room. Yeah, you can feel that difference.
It's that user thing. It's being a user, right?
Yeah.
Don't be a user, but go there to make a connection. So if you're on on Tinder because you want to have sex with somebody, that's different to being on Tinder because you want to have a relationship with somebody. And I think what you want to do in these environments like a bar is form a relationship. And it's not necessarily even with individual people. It's your relationship with the industry. You want to be liked, and you want to be informed, and you want to be the kind of person that I might be sitting at the bar with one of my mates and say, hey, I know you from the classroom. Yes. You're saying, come and talk to me and Isabel Carmody, because Isabel is sitting at the bar and is available and we're just chatting. She's nice, you're nice, you might get on. And that could be as far as a relationship goes, but it could go further.
I know we will have people sitting at home thinking, oh, but I can't afford to travel, or my lifestyle doesn't permit, or I can't afford a conference.
Or there's no planes flying.
Yeah, well, exactly. Or I can't, even afford to join an organisation. You don't have to do any of these things. Like, there are a lot of success stories, but a lot of these communities are available online and for free too. You can find Facebook groups. You can, like I said, Twitter hashtags.
I was a published author who had sold a novel before I went to a science fiction convention. And this was in the days before the World Wide Web, as I said earlier. Everything I had done was via email. I hadn't met anyone.
Yeah. That's where I was going with mentioning Writers' Centres. Back in the day, I remember going to, it was called the South Australian Writers' Centre back then, and they had a copy of the Publishers Marketplace that you could sit there and read through.
Wow.
Yes.
And I remember going and taking notes.
Something kind of romantic about that, isn't there?
Yeah. And they had their book with agents as well. It listed all the agents and how you could apply. And they'd release it. It was a copy a year of saying what they were looking for that year.
And the Essay Writers Centre was pivotal to my career, just as Writers Essay might be to yours, because instead of you having to go seeking the experiences, they're a forum for bringing the experiences to you. So I did my first public reading through Writers Essay. I was on my first board. I judged my first contest. I held my first workshop.
That might have been a door at my house slamming.
Wow, that was fantastic. It was very poltergeisty. Yeah.
I think you can blame Jonathan, who might be walking down the stairs. Yeah. Are you sorry? How sorry are you really? It was the wind. Sure it was.
Yeah, that's right. But join your Writers' Centre and you will find these things are available to you naturally without you having to go anywhere, because they bring writers to your town all the time, online, if not physically.
Well, especially at the moment. I have a third question, but I'm just going to circle back to something that Sean alluded to earlier, which was free money. Do you want to sort of elaborate on what you meant by bringing agents free money?
Oh.
You're not talking about bribery, obviously. You're talking about contracts, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's right. So I had sold 3 novels myself in Australia, but I knew I had to get an agent overseas in order to, make the kind of income that would make being a full-time writer possible. And it was Kim Stanley Robinson, I think, who said, if you can set up a deal, like an offer from a publisher, then you can go to an agent and say, here's this deal in place. Will you represent me? And you're offering them a free commission. You're offering them free money. So the next time I was in that...
I've noticed actors do that too, a lot.
Yeah, and it's not a bad advice. So I managed to get a couple of publishers in Australia interested in my next series. I emailed a friend and said, give me the name of an agent. Went to that agent and they didn't respond within a week. And I thought, screw that guy. I'm offering him free money. So everybody at that point was talking about an agent called Richard Curtis. He was the hottest agent in the world. So I thought, I'm going to email him.
Not the guy that wrote Notting Hill, obviously.
No. He was an agent in New York, different man, same name. This guy responded within 24 hours. I talked him into reading my manuscript by saying that I wrote like an American, wrote in a way that was suitable for the American market, and he ended up taking me on. And the first thing he did was take it away from my Australian authors and sell it to an American publisher within 30 days. So by offering him a very small commission, I was able to demonstrate that I was writing commercially, and at the very least, he would make that small commission if he just checked the contracts over.
It's that thing, isn't it? It's like going for a bank loan. Bear with me. When you're really struggling and you really need money, it's really hard to get a loan. But once you have a full-time job, you can get a loan, right? They'll throw money. And so it's that sort of thing of not being too needy, and then they'll start to appear, if that makes any sense.
Well, they do say that the publishers can smell money. So if you're stinking of failure and desperation, they're not going to want to publish you.
It's a bad smell.
I don't know if that's entirely true. I think publishers will publish good book too.
Well, I had an actor friend who decided he didn't want to be an actor anymore, and that filled in with absolute confidence, and the jobs just started piling in.
Yeah.
And it became like, you don't need to audition, you can just have the role. Oh, well, I don't really want to come in Wednesday. Oh, we can shoot it Thursday. Oh, yeah, okay. It just became, and I think it was just his aloofness weirdly became like a magnet, because there's nothing more bizarre than an actor who isn't needy. And so everyone goes, this actor isn't needy. He must be amazing. It's that weird psychological game. I have one more question, although I'm conscious of time. Let's say it all goes well. Everything goes well. You go to your local organisation, your writers' centre, what have you. You make that connection. Someone likes your profile. You go on a few dates. You start a relationship with this agent. I've written, what can you expect from an agent? But I'm going to modify that slightly and say, what fairly can you expect from an agent? What, reasonably can you expect from an agent?
What you can expect, I think the most important thing is you should never pay for things. They should take money out of anything they sell. Like they take their commission, which is usually around 15%. But you should never pay reading costs, or it should come out of the money they're earning for you. And I think a lot of beginning writers, particularly now, I've heard some shocking stories this year about people being milked for money. Just shocking stories about being charged for things, and not from reputable agents and publishers, from these people online who masquerade. When you're starting out, you know nothing.
You don't. How can you tell?
And there's a lot of really desperate people who really want to sell, and it's their life's dream, and they just get bilked out of money. So you shouldn't be paying. You shouldn't pay a publisher. You shouldn't pay an agent. Agents take their money out of money they earn for you, right? They take their 15% commission. So that's number one, is what you should expect, and you should be very firm on that one. You should expect, they're all different about how much they read your work or whether they edit or give feedback, so you don't necessarily expect that kind of thing. So the questions I would ask when you're talking to an agent before you sign on, because remember, they're going to be working for you. You're kind of employing them. So I think that power relationship is when you start out, you're desperate, right? So they have the power. But actually in the relationship, it's a very equal relationship where you're employing their services and they're taking a commission. So you have to remember that, right? So the questions I would ask are, do you read manuscripts? Do you offer any editorial services? Do you do career planning, or are you just selling whatever I send to you? Do you have sub-agents if you're selling in other territories? So if you are in Sydney, do you sell personally into the UK or the US? Does your company, like if you're with, I don't know, Curtis Brown, say, do you have a sub-agent already engaged, or are you going to be having to find a sub-agent? Well, how much commission do I have to pay then? Is it a bigger commission? Does it come out of your commission? There are a lot of kind of business questions.
Yeah.
And what will they sell?
Yeah.
I mean, most agents do novels, but some might do collections of short stories. Very, very few will do short stories unless you're incredibly successful, like Neil Gaiman or Stephen King or others.
Mostly it's just your big work.
Yes.
The other one is, like, I know, because I was recently hunting for agents, my current agent, expected me to do my due diligence on her as well, and to look up her recent sales, to be really informed about who she was and to have reasonable expectations. So because of the internet now, you can look up, what have they sold lately?
Yep.
Like you can look at Publishers Marketplace and see, and you can look up
who they represent as well. So if they're an agent that has lots of authors' estates but no living authors, then maybe you're not going to be a great fit for them. Or if they represent authors that write a lot of romance but not fantasy, but you want to do fantasy, they're not going to be a good fit for you.
Have they ever broken an author? Do they just have lower mid-list, or have they broken someone through to the next level? You want to say something like, does your agency or do you manage, representation for media, like audio rights, film rights?
Yep.
What is your track record there?
Yes. Where are they based too is a really important question even today. Like if they're not in New York, London or Sydney, then that's a strike against them. It's not an impossibility, but they are the major hubs of publishing in the Western world, and you want an agent that will be able to have a drink with the commissioning editor at Penguin Random House.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get the lowdown on what they're actually publishing.
I mean, very, very much the case in film as well. You've got to be in the eastern states.
I would also be, when you start out, look, your first time, you're pretty lucky to get in the door. So you don't want to be...
I've still got the Tinder metaphor in my head, and I just love that as a sentence. Yeah. The first time, you're pretty lucky to get in the door.
Don't be turning everyone down. Don't be looking for Claudia Schiffer. It does actually work, doesn't it? Because I do know people who are single because they want this ideal person that doesn't exist. That's probably a good metaphor. That you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. Like, this may not be your agent for all time.
Unless you sign a bad contract. Yes. So that's another thing you want to have a really close look at is the agreement with the agency. Are you signing the rights to your works in perpetuity, which you obviously don't want to do, but a lot of agents expect you to do. So don't do that.
We're running out of time, I think.
That is unusual for us, isn't it?
Did you have one more point you wanted to make, Amy?
I was just going to say, when you go out in the world, I think you should believe in yourself, but be humble enough to keep learning. They're the two things, I think.
Love that. Excellent. Yeah, absolutely.
Another piece of advice would be to remember that you can always break up that relationship just like you can with anybody else. So if you do get an agent and it's not working out, you can always say exactly that. I'm sorry, this is not working out. I'm going to go find somebody else. And a good agent.
Do you say it's not you, it's me? That's the cliche.
No. I actually said to the agent that I had to say, look, it's not working out. And he said, yes, I agree. Godspeed.
Right.
And this was an agent who I knew could be very litigious.
Right. Interesting.
If the breakup went badly. So I was actually very nervous about that conversation, but it was very calm and very
Most of them
wonderful.
seem great. I think it's a bit like students, right? Like we talked about this when we talked about teaching, about when they come and it's a really big deal for them, but this is our day-to-day job and we're not that emotionally invested in it. We're like, I'm sorry that we're losing you, but Godspeed. Like, I don't think most agents, they don't want you there if you don't want to be there, probably.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to be there if they can't help you.
No.
Absolutely. So that's all excellent advice. I feel like this is another subject area where we could go on, for many, many glasses and many hours.
Well, I think we should do submissions too. That's like the practical one of like how you write a query letter, how you get your sample chapters together. That kind of stuff could be interesting too.
Absolutely. So we'll do that in the future. Just last point, touching on the student issue. I had a student write to me at 4:00 in the morning to say, I've been watching all your online lectures and they're great, which was really, really lovely. But I thought at 4:00 in the morning, sleep for goodness sake. But that idea of that emotional connection, whereas, professionally you might be a step removed and go, so you're right. That student-teacher relationship is perhaps not unlike an actor-client relationship. Fantastic. Thank you very much. There's lots of really strong insight there. I've been taking notes and I hope everyone listening has as well. And
right now I know how to set up a Tinder profile. It's fantastic. If I ever need one, I'll know what to do. That wasn't
supposed to be the takeaway, Sean.
Oh, sorry. Sorry? Have I slipped into the wrong podcast?
And as ever, we will end with happy writing.
Happy writing.
Happy writing.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them start with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
We're on fire.
We're on fire. Okay. What's the thing? What's it called? Submissions?
We're submitting to you, Alex.
We submit.
Okay. Slightly creepy. All right.
Wouldn't be the first time we've been creepy.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.